Hi, everyone. This is Samira Daswani, the host of the podcast, The Patient from Hell. We at Manda Cares are a global community of cancer survivors, caregivers, and patients. We've been on this mission now for the past year and a half where we produce very real, authentic content from the many aspects of our community. On this podcast, we've had experts, we've had patients, we've had survivors, we've had caregivers, we've had researchers. And today it is my complete privilege to have Yi-wen on this podcast. She and I actually didn't meet at our former workplace, but we can get into that in a bit of this podcast. But we did work at the same company and met because of the cancer diagnosis that both of us had. We've had very different paths in the cancer experience, and I'm very excited to have her on this podcast for her to share her experiences, her learnings, and all the wisdom she's gathered in the last year. So with that, thank you for being on this podcast.
Thank you, Samira, for the invitation. Yeah, it's great to be able to share my experience, and hopefully that could help some people.
That is our goal. So we are aligned.
Yes.
So I actually just want to start at the beginning. Can you just tell us what happened? How did you get diagnosed? Just give us kind of unfortunately, the sort of raw experience that you had.
Yeah. So I work in the biotech industry. So I worked through the pandemic in another workplace. And I noticed, so when the COVID-19 started easing up a little bit, so my son plays travel baseball a lot. So we started pretty soon after the easing of the pandemic. And then, so I noticed that I couldn't raise my right arm as easily. And then at one point it got to that I just couldn't raise it at all. But besides that, I didn't really have any other symptoms or anything. So I just thought it was odd. I thought something, was pulling on the tendon or muscles. So I just scheduled a general checkup. And that was after I changed job. So that's when I went to your company. And I thought, okay, I'll, have it checked like before I dive all the way into this new job. And the doctor, my family doctor was like, oh yeah, it's just probably something growing. So we'll just have it removed. So she didn't think much about it either, because the previous mammogram was fine. But that was like a year and a half ago or two. So I did skip one because of the pandemic. And then, the news got real bad real quickly. So you go from mammogram, ultrasound, biopsy. Okay, so then they found out it's cancerous and what type of cancer. Metastatic. Well, we didn't know it was metastatic then. We just knew that it was breast cancer, and the doctor was very encouraging and said, "We're going to cure this. There's a cure. It's fine." And then I started looking for an oncologist. Found one, scheduled some blood work. She found the blood work results really bizarre, so ordered scans. And we found out that I had the cancer had metastasized to liver and the bone, and the liver metastasis was pretty bad. So she was going on vacation. This all happened like in the summer. So my family doctor was also on vacation when she had to do the referrals and stuff. And then my oncologist was going on vacation. So I ended up meeting another oncologist on a Friday afternoon to get my diagnosis straight and learn about, survival rates, blah, 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 blah. And on Tuesday, I was hospitalized to have a port inserted and it started chemo right away. So it was crazy, I would say, almost a month. Yeah. While on the new job.
Mm-hmm. So we share a lot of similarities in the starting part of our story. I do start at the same company, and within weeks of me starting, I actually found a lump. So for me, I found the lump in my right armpit, so right axilla, and I went to a random PCP who, of course, dismissed it. No family history, too young, clear health. A complete fluke. I got an ultrasound done, just complete fluke. I was having issue with my right leg, so not my right arm, my right leg, and got an ultrasound for my right leg, and I just happened to be like, yeah, let's just do the ultrasound for the armpit, just in case. And that then kick-started everything, and this was within the first few weeks of the new job. I don't know about you, but I was in my head, I was like, I'm about to get fired, aren't I? I started this new company. And this was, I think we were off by maybe a year. I had joined just before COVID.
Yeah.
And and in retrospect, I know that there's all these laws and legal protections to prevent that from happening. But I was like, I was ready. I was like, if I announce that this is happening, I am going to get fired.
I kept it pretty transparent the whole way, actually. So I feel like I could really tell my boss and coworkers at the time. So a few close coworkers knew because I had to have so many appointments. And then as soon as I heard something, like, so from the beginning, it was like, oh, I might have breast cancer. We don't know what stage. We don't know anything about it. And then it went from that, like maybe it was like stage 3, and then all the way to like it's metastatic. I'm going to the hospital. So I kept it, and I think the fact that it metastasized made it easy. In that, I was in the lab, and I was like, what am I doing here? Is this how I'm gonna spend my life or time? Like any minute of it, I don't want to do this away from my kids and be with my family. So it made it easier to prioritize. Yeah, and also luckily I have a supporting husband, and I don't have to worry about like financial issues.
So this is actually, I'm so glad you just said all of this, because this, I think, sets up the many themes that I was hoping to unpack with this podcast, right? So theme one was, we both had breast cancer diagnoses, very, very different.
Yeah.
Very different experiences, right? Because mine was early stage, metastatic at diagnosis. We worked at the same company in roles, right? I think we were in the lab. I was not in the lab. I was on the product side and the commercial side. And for me, the experience was very different because when I did tell my boss was super supportive, and everybody, I had to disclose it because I was in a leadership role at the company, and I absolutely had to disclose it. So I did, but I did it after I had a diagnosis and a plan, and I knew kind of what I was walking into. And the reaction was, hey, look, we're here, we got you, we want you to lead the COVID program that we had. And I very naively said yes, which in retrospect was a different, just there's a lot we can unpack on that side, right? But even our reactions, the diagnosis were different. And so for us, it's almost like early stage metastatic, same workplace, different parts of the workplace, how we chose to disclose it, and then how that impacts kind of your relationship with work as well. So for you, it was immediate prioritization. For me, boundary setting and prioritization did not come early. It came in the next many months, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah, because you stayed on the job, right? And I didn't.
Yes,
I started, I think, in June, and then by July 20th. So on that Friday, that dark Friday, I learned the MBC status. I just bawled and like company tried to call me. I said, I need a, I'm hospitalized by Tuesday. So I didn't go into work, starting that Friday. And so I was on medical leave first, for half a year. And then we thought, there was one time, so after 6 rounds of chemo and target therapy, there was a clean scan, nothing. So then it was really great news. And my team actually thought I was going to be able to go back to work. And I said, well, hold on, I don't know how long this status is going to hold. So I decided not to return after 6 months, which I think retrospectively looking at it, it's a good decision because we found out that it went to my brain within 3 months after the clearing. Yeah. So like totally unexpected. So we found out in April, that it was like, there were many, many spots in the brain. So we started radiation right away. The whole brain radiation. Yeah. And then that quieted it a little bit. And then I also moved to UCSF for a clinical trial then. Yeah. And then, things just change pretty frequently with the scans. So I only stayed on the trial for maybe 5 to 6 months, and then it progressed a little bit again. So and it's all because like I was traveling and stuff, and so the doctors wanted to make sure that I'd be okay, and they scan, and it's not okay, but it's okay to travel. And you just have to come back to new treatment afterwards. Yeah, so then I was off the clinical trial. So within like 1.5 years, I've had like 3-4 different treatment plans, and nothing was good enough or strong enough to hold it at bay. And so I'm on like this new drug combo that started January as well.
There's a lot of questions I have for you, actually, given what you just said. But I'm actually hoping that we can start with your status today. So can you tell us a bit more about what's it looking like today? Anything you'd like to share about prognosis and outcomes and how you're thinking about it would be great.
So actually, I don't know. So I have an upcoming scan in March. And so after 3 rounds of the new drugs, then the doctors wants to see whether it's working or not. So that's when I will actually find out like how things look inside. I've been doing great. So last year, so we had all kinds of travel. So I was in high spirits. We went to Europe, we went to Cooperstown, we went to Hawaii, we went to Taiwan. And I run every day, like 4 to 6 miles.
You run 4 to 6 miles every day?
Yeah. And I keep creating my own like personal record, like how fast I run and stuff. And I drive the kids around. I do pottery. I write. I'm pretty active. So I feel great. And honestly, even if there's progression, when you hear it, it'll be disappointing and upsetting for a while, maybe a few minutes or, half an hour. And then, I'm living, I'm doing fine. I can run, I can talk, I can chat with my kids. I'm living every day. So I try very hard to not have to think about, the results, like how quickly the cancer is taking my body over and stuff. I don't think about my cancer cells that much.
That is absolutely incredible. 4 to 6 miles, I do not know how to do that. I don't think I could do that today, let
No,
alone
I don't.
during
No, I
treatment.
never did. I never did. I never ran. I
Oh,
couldn't. Like in college, I noticed like my left knee was hurting,
mm,
so I never I stopped. I couldn't run. I couldn't even walk quickly. Yeah. And so it's all after cancer diagnosis, after chemo, then I felt like and the first day I was just like, okay, I'm gonna try, maybe uh, half a lap or something. I'll try to run for like
yeah,
100 meters or something.
yeah.
And that went from 1 lap to 3 laps, and 4 laps. And yeah, it grew from there. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what made you choose running? Like, why running?
Ah, yeah. So my dad, so actually both my parents are cancer survivors, and they had different ones. My mom had breast cancer, but different type. So actually, my cancer is not genetic. Um, and my dad had liver cancer, but they were both early stage. So they went through pretty aggressive treatments, surgery, radiation, chemo, um, and my dad started running after his recovery, and he's lived both of them have lived 10 plus years after. So I just thought, okay, I'll try that one. It worked for my dad because we totally thought we were like my dad wasn't gonna make it past a certain age, and he just kept running, and so I was like, oh, maybe I can run too.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
We just recorded a podcast that I think by the time we've released this one would have released already, and it's a podcast with Dr. Manuela Kogan, who is
Uh-huh.
a clinician at Stanford, and
Uh-huh.
she talks about kind of why patients and survivors need a. I'm gonna botch how she said this. They need they need a project
Mm-hmm.
between scans, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek because
Uh-huh.
it allows the
Uh-huh.
brain to have what she was calling focus attention. You're
Mm.
basically using focused attention on an activity that gives you pleasure or gives you some sort of emotional reward. It's a way of exercising control, like the desire for
Mm-hmm.
control of a life,
Mm-hmm.
but it's being exercised
Mm-hmm.
in a different part of your life than the cancer side. Because on the cancer
Mm.
side, you just don't, you said this right. You really don't know the outcomes,
Yeah, yeah.
and you can't. So she
Mm-hmm.
says it really nicely. So to hear you say that,
Mm-hmm.
I I thought that was a very nice elucidation of her theoretical underpinning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's sort of just that I feel like exercising should be good. And then and this yeah, yeah. So I sometimes swim as well. So it's interchangeable, and the days I can do it, I do it.
Yeah,
The days I can't, I don't push it. It's great.
that is incredible. I want to go back to something you
Yeah.
said a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them was you've had 4 or 5 treatment plans over the
Mm-hmm.
past
Mm-hmm.
couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to talk to you about decision making. And the
Mm.
reason I want to talk about decision making is we've had now a couple of different types of patients who've had different types of cancers. And what we are
Mm-hmm.
realizing is just through our dialogues is in the oncology community, we sort of have this umbrella term called shared decision making, right? Where you, the
Mm-hmm.
patient, the family to some extent, and then the oncologist kind of have this funny meeting of sorts and you come to a decision. In the
Mm-hmm.
early stage breast cancer setting, there is a
Mm-hmm.
preponderance of data, right? So the burden on
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
understanding the many, many,
Yeah.
many treatment options sits
Yeah.
actually on the patient and the family. Then we've had situations with patients and family members from the rare cancer, that sort of big cohort, where there is such a lack of data that you are sort of doing a lot of empiric-based treatment, right? You are talking to experts, the experts won't agree. Then you have conversations with other patients. You're doing this like case study-based method of decision making. Then we have we've had a couple of conversations with a couple of folks with incurable cancers. And in the incurable setting, you know from the outset it's not going to get cured. It's not metastatic yet. So you have this decide and wait. That's just like decision, and then there's a long waiting period until something happens, right? So I'm curious, given your experiences and your biotech brain, right? You're a scientist, you've worked in biotech. I'd love to understand how you thought of decision making, how quickly it changed, how have you navigated that for yourself?
Yeah. So when I first found out I had cancer and I had to get treatment and stuff, one of the first things I did was to announce it on Facebook.
Intentionally?
So
That was like,
yeah,
I'm going to announce it.
yeah, because I have a lot of friends everywhere, and I wasn't gonna call everyone and down them. And down myself like a million times. So I was like, yeah, and this is all happening too quickly. So I just put it out there. And then my friends all jumped in, and someone organized meal train and all kinds of resource like gathering for me. So because of my background, so I'm a chemist by training. And I went to Harvard to get my PhD. So I have a lot of friends who are actually, even though I'm a physical chemist, I have a lot of friends that are in, biotech research, that are in the medical space, sometimes from the pharmaceutical side, sometimes from the medical research side. So once they saw that on Facebook, they jumped in and asked for details of my cancer diagnosis, because then they can ask the experts and stuff. So I sort of assembled a team of friends as my medical advisors, basically. So I would ask them from time to time, like what their opinion or what their research on this is, and what are the clinical information or trials out there. And my husband did a lot of research as well. He's also a PhD scientist, so he can read literature and stuff. So but when it comes to actual decision making, sometimes it was just going so fast that we didn't have much time. Like the first round jumping into chemotherapy and the first line of therapy, that's pretty standard. So that happened very quickly. And also the radiation, the whole brain radiation happened very quickly. But as to the decision to move to clinical trial and and stay on or off, or that sort of also, that choice was taken away from me in a way. But there are times when I was on clinical trial, I'd be thinking, because there are other sort of treatment options, or there's other things that people try that you can't do on clinical trial.
Can you tell us more about what you meant by that choice was taken away from you?
Well, yeah, so it just metastatic. So it had progressed a little bit. So yeah, so and with that, I was basically kicked off the clinical trial because of little progression. Yeah, I wasn't worried,
I see.
But it does mean that I can't use that combination of drugs.
I see. Yi-wen, can we maybe take 2 steps back? I think there's a lot of our audience, and I'll tell you why. I think a lot of our audience may not be familiar with clinical trials and why patients and family members choose to enroll in a trial. So if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about why clinical trials, why were you looking for it, this friend medical advisory group that you had? I think you specifically asked them to do research on what are the trials that you might be eligible for. So maybe if you don't
Mm-hmm.
mind, talk a little bit about that. And
Yeah. So there were a few things. So I was reading a lot after I learned about my diagnosis. Um, and I actually had a friend who was in Boston, and he did a lot of like different moving basically from trial to trial, trying different drugs because he was stage 4 when he found out as well, his cancer. So so I was aware that there are these clinical trials, but I didn't know what they consist of or what that means.
Yeah.
Um, but and I wasn't considering them because it is I think at the time I would think it's, the last resort, basically. If you are on clinical trials, that means a lot of other drugs don't work. And yeah, so I didn't want to think about it that way either. But when it metastasized to my brain, with the whole brain treatment, then my doctor had to think about other drugs. And when I was going through the chemotherapy, I stayed with a local clinic, but then I decided to also go to Stanford and UCSF to have expert second opinion. And so I had made the connection with doctors and experts in the field already in case I need them. So it was easier to just make appointments later on. So when I found out it went to the brain, I immediately emailed both doctors and see if they had ideas or thoughts on how to, or treatment plans. And the UCSF doctor actually had this clinical trial.
I see.
And so she was like, yeah, come. And then I qualified. So, and my doctor then encouraged me to go on the trial as well. So the way clinical trials, there are different types of clinical trials, different stages, different phases. The one I was on was phase 2, which means there's no control group yet. So everybody gets the medication, and they wanted to see how well it works. So you get, I actually really enjoyed my experience on the clinical trial because there are coordinators that make appointments for you, and you don't have to call to make all the scans, all the blood work, whatever appointments. And they may draw a few more tubes of blood. They have a regular scan schedule. And that's about it. And on the protocol, you can't do other treatments and stuff. Yeah, but it was pretty, it was a good experience. Yeah, so I was a little bit sad that I couldn't stay on for as long as I wanted to. But there could be other trials starting soon. So it was good that we moved to UCSF as opposed to staying at a smaller organization, because my doctor does know the latest in research and drug development and trials. So we have that information.
How are you looking for trials right now? Are you just relying on the doctor, or are you eliciting?
No, so there's, I think NIH has a website. Yeah, so you can there's a database you can search and all the clinical trials, the phase, the criteria, what they're looking for. Sometimes they want people that have tried many drugs. Sometimes they don't. And whether, brain metastasis, make or break. Yeah. So there are all kinds of different criteria. So it's not easy to necessarily screen for the ones that you need right now. So there's nothing that I have nearby right now. Yeah. But I'm also not dying. So
I love that. By the way, we will link to the NIH website, clinicaltrials.gov, I think is the one you're referring to. And we'll link to that in the show notes so people can look up the database. It is free. It's not the most user-friendly, but it is absolutely, it gets the job done.
Yes.
Requires patience, and willingness to work with government technology. But outside of those two things, it's I think a phenomenal database.
Yeah. And I do think a lot of people that participate in the clinical trials feel the same way that, even if it doesn't work for me, it's helpful for others to know, what might work and what might not.
Correct.
So it's interesting for, I guess, as a scientist, it was interesting, we study data points, right? And I ended up being a data point in a clinical trial. I was like, oh, that's one way to contribute.
Oh, this is a funny story. I've been wanting to say this on the podcast for a while. We actually never explained why we're called the patient from hell, but I think you'd appreciate this. The chief medical officer at the company we work for, he's someone who was on my sort of personal medical advisory board for sure.
Yes.
He's absolutely a wonderful human being, and when I got diagnosed, he was the first person I told, and honestly, I think he was the first person who told me that I most likely have cancer. That's a much longer story, but He told me to buy a book and read the book before I started chemotherapy, and the book is called The Patient from Hell. Much longer title. It's written by a Stanford professor who now no longer is alive, who got diagnosed with a rare cancer. He actually didn't die from rare cancer. He died from other things, but he wrote this book. And the premise of the book, which is different than the premise of our podcast, the premise of the book is all about empiric versus cohort-based medicine. So he essentially argues that medicine today is all about cohorts. You bucket you bucket early stage HER2 positive breast cancer, early stage triple negative breast cancer, stage 4 metastatic cancer. You're like constantly cohorting people because you're building treatments for this group of people. So clinicians and researchers are used to thinking in cohorts, right? We're used to thinking, what was the end? Did we have enough evidence in this full group of people? He argues that in the rare cancer setting, where you don't have that data, and to a large extent the metastatic setting, where you don't have the data, that is privileged from the power of the N, right? The number of people or samples you have in that group. He argues the need for empiric-based treatment. So he essentially says, you individual, your reaction to that one drug is more important than the study that was done in that cohort. And he essentially wrote this book partly because he started advocating for himself and talking about how he became the patient from hell at this university academic medical center because he was advocating for empiric-based treatment. And that book, had I not read that book, I honestly don't think this podcast would be named what it is. But more importantly, I don't think I would have advocated for myself as much as I did. But the idea that you are a data point in a group, I think is how medicine thinks about it. But then you are a data point that is always changing over time.
Yes.
Your data point is also changing. And what is your trend line saying? I think has become kind of, at least for me, a mental model framework that I've used throughout my cancer experience.
Yeah. So when I was deciding to participate in the trial, I feel like I'm contributing to the data. But in general, I try not to think about myself as a data point because data is not good. Prognosis is not good. I asked my doctor straight up. I said, with the brain metastasis, it seems like prognosis is not good. And my doctor actually, she's probably very skilled at answering this kind of question, but she was like, well, we actually don't know with current advancement, because in the past, a lot of the brain metastasized patients, the prognosis are poor because the cancer was not controlled well in their body. So the whole body was breaking down. So it is I guess, indicative of like the later stage. But now with a lot of other, because when I was having still some brain metastasis, after I was on the trial, they could handle that with gamma knife and cyber knife and not medication change. And there was nothing on the liver, there was nothing in the body. So she said, this is, sort of the new territory that we don't know what the prognosis is for anyone.
That's remarkable, right? That is absolutely remarkable, because on the one hand, I think it is different than the past, which is very like I'm guessing reinforcing and positive motivation. There's a lot of stuff that comes from it. But I'm guessing at the same time, I don't know about you, but I find comfort in data. So someone tells me data doesn't exist, I go into like, hello, I need more data, please. So I don't know about you, but it actually causes anxiety for me if there is not data. So I'm curious how you
we have seen some, like, I'm very selective. So I only want good data.
Hey, that works.
Hopeful data.
That works.
Yeah. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
The criteria is, if the data is good, i.e., I think it will be in my favor. Totally not unbiased at all, by the way. Completely unbiased. Very scientific. Very objective. But yes, I'm with you.
Yeah. Luckily, we don't do that at work.
Yeah, I don't think we'd get a job in biotech.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
On that kind of amusing note, I would actually love to hear a bit more about how you've handled kind of the uncertainty, but with respect to your family. Because I think you have kids. I think you've mentioned at least your son on this podcast. You mentioned your spouse. Sounds like a phenomenal support group that's coming from across the country. I'd love to sort of hear you talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was definitely very scary. I think so scary that I don't even think my kids know what it means. So I have two sons. One is 16 now, and the other one is 12 and a half. And I've been married to my high school sweetheart for over 20 years.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was good that my husband was with me when we heard about the diagnosis together, and we had a good cry. And when we had to come home and tell the kids, I never hide anything from the kids. And, but I also don't want to, like, overwhelm them. So it was hard to decide what to do, but ultimately, we decided, because I was going to the hospital soon to stay overnight, that I was like, yeah, we're going to tell the kids and as honestly as we can.
Yeah.
So I told them that I have cancer, and both of them freaked out because they didn't know how to respond. They know the cancer word, but they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And of course, the first question is, are you going to die? And I said, yes, but everyone's going to die. So will you. And then they're like, okay, so like, when will you die? I was like, I don't know. Do you know? I said 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 2 years. I don't know. I really don't at the time. I still don't. And so they're like, okay. So, they cried. I think they were scared and worried because it was just unknown. But then in my Facebook post, I said, I wanted the kids to have a normal life, with or without me. And so I want people to treat them the same. I don't want them to always, to start with like, oh, how's your mom doing? Like, is she okay? So I I think all of my friends and, the community like didn't put them on a weird spot. And so after I told them, I think pretty quickly, it's pretty back to normal. Like, we live as normal as a life as can be, with the difference being I'm a stay-at-home mom now, not a career woman. Yeah, but they like my kids will actually tell you that cancer is not all bad. And they say, my other one's like, yeah, we're much closer now. Like the family is much tighter and closer. They're nicer to me now. I'm nicer to them now. And yeah, so I sort of, and we don't talk about the future. Like I don't talk about, oh, when you graduate, blah, 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 or when you do this, do that, because there's no point. Like we just enjoy all the moments we're together and talk about now, talk about tomorrow, talk about, maybe this week. And we don't try to look ahead and then get us down like, oh, what if? Yeah, so dealing with uncertainty, I look away from it, I guess, in a way, but you also know, I mean, uncertainty is everywhere in life, right? You just don't, everybody looks away.
Yeah.
Like you could be hit by a car and your life is different.
Yeah.
And we just don't think about it. So when I operate normally, I do that.
I think there's a lot of profound insight in what you shared. I think the not talking about the future piece, I definitely relate. For a period of a year, I couldn't look out more than a week. But for me, it was time boxed, right? Like I had to do that for a year, and then there was this transition of when treatment got done for me because I was a discrete endpoint.
Yeah.
It was like a mental shift because for a year and a half or so, it was like 1 week at a time. Actually, honestly, 1 day at a time. But you could see after the weekend, and then after that, at least for early stage breast cancer, and I'm talking purely for myself, I had to transition back because everyone around me was not in that mode, right? Everyone around me is talking about the future, and I was like, wait, what? This is foreign. I don't know how to. I haven't used that muscle in a while. So for me, it was like this gradual increase. Okay, can I think out a month? Can I think out 2 months? Can I think out 3 months? And then I've been like gradually pushing it. So I'm right now at about a year. I can think out about a year.
Okay.
Like a year. I feel comfortable talking about it. But I can imagine that when you're in that mode of I can think out a few days or the weekend, you're also, I think, training your kids to think that way, which is, I think, remarkable because the future, I think, can cause anxiety for anyone.
Yes.
And I think we as a society put so much emphasis on the future, your future action, what school you're going to go to, what job you're going to get, will you be able to set up a life and buy a home, etc. It keeps going. So I feel like you're teaching such an important lesson to your kids.
Yeah. I think, and actually they say, like, I'm happier after the cancer diagnosis and they're happier, which is really ironic. Yeah.
I think it's ironic, but I also think it's real.
Yeah. I think it's true. Yeah. Because I mean, what else can happen?
I for what it's worth, I am definitely happy for it too. I don't know if I should be as provocative and say I'm grateful that it happened, but I live a different life today than I did pre-cancer.
Yes.
Some ways it's harder, but in a lot of ways it's much, much better than it was before.
Yeah.
So we're about at the wrap up point. So usually I do sort of a synopsis of our episode, but I think we've touched upon so many different things that I'm actually hesitant to do that today. I actually would love for you to close it with anything that you want to give to your friends, your family, your community, anything you want to say to them anything you want to say to people who hear your story, things that they should take away from all the experiences you've had? Sorry, I know, very, very broad question and kind of.
No, I know, yeah, but I actually have jotted down some thoughts.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, some messages. So I think the biggest lesson is to enjoy the moment, enjoy your life, all the time, every day. It's a privilege, and don't think about how long, how much. Just take now, take as many as you can, and live it day by day, moment by moment, and enjoy it to the fullest. That's one. I also think it's important to make decisions for yourself. In a way, cancer is a gift that it's a long journey. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow necessarily. So you have time to plan. So I think about my funeral. I think about my music playlist in the funeral. I think about, what I want people to do. I think about life celebrations and people I want to see before I go. So I think about a lot of those things and make those decisions for myself instead of, my husband or my kids wondering what I would do. So I thought that's, and that calms me too, knowing that I have a plan and that, people just need to follow. They don't have to worry about it. And also setting up trust. And let's see, I take responsibility of my lifestyle and my health and ownership of my health. It is my body in the end, and no doctors can tell me what to do or not do. But you have to act responsibly. Accept help. Let others support you, and connect with people, tell people and share with people, and people will, people really appreciate it. And that's how you also find another level of meaning of life. And that makes you want to live more. Have diverse interests. I think it's really important because as as maybe the disease progresses or as you age, your ability to do things will change. You might start losing your hearing, you might start losing your vision, your mobility. How do you enjoy life when things are taken away from you? Because, I still want to live for my kids, for myself, to see all the things that the world has to offer. So it's important to have diverse, to be able to enjoy different things, sports, music, art, exercise, connecting with people, food, all kinds of things. I think it's incredible to I guess, make a happy life that's worth living for. And just don't look back. Don't think about why I got cancer or why it's me. Don't think about what I ate, what I didn't do, what I did to cause this. Just move on, enjoy the life, enjoy the moment. Yeah.
That is so profound that is beautiful. I think that really does sum up everything we've spoken about today, which is enjoy the moment.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for recording this episode with us. We're very excited that a lot of people will get to hear it. And
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This podcast, show notes, and newsletter is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or any materials linked from this blog is at the user's own risk. The content here is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.